has happened in the recent past is this past November, obviously the national result was not what we wanted or expected, but Hillary Clinton did win Orange County, just as she won San Diego County. Now, San Diego County we expected. Orange County we didn't. Hillary was actually the first Democrat since 1936 to win Orange County, which is a remarkable feat, which tells me that nothing is impossible in politics. There are always changing tides. And when I see what's happened since the election and some of the damaging policies that we've seen and that we've experienced, even this past week, I know that the tide continues to change, and I don't think we're going to have a Republican elected in Orange County, and certainly not in San Diego County for president in the foreseeable future. So I was very content working on those campaigns. I eventually made my way into the practice of law. I became an environmental attorney. I got very active in the clean energy industry, first working for other companies and then eventually going in-house to 2 companies, both of which grew and created a lot of jobs in the industry. And I serve on 3 environmental-related nonprofits, including for the Center for Sustainable Energy, which is the largest energy-related nonprofit. And I don't know, how many people here have an electric car? Anybody? Not a single hand? Hybrids count. Hybrids count. Oh, hybrids. Oh, this is good. This is good. Okay, now the hands are going up. This is exciting. Did your hand go up? No. Okay. So I'm hopeful that if I come back in a year, that more hands will go up, and then a couple of more years, more hands will go up still. How many people have solar panels on the roof? Excellent. Oh my gosh, this is great. Fantastic. Fantastic. So I'm encouraged that when I go into Republican neighborhoods, including in my neighborhood in San Juan Capistrano, we get a lot of those hands to go up. That tells me we're making incredible progress. If you got a rebate for your electric car or for your solar panels on your roof, chances are it came from the nonprofit where I've served on the board for the last several years, the Center for Sustainable Energy. So I've been very proud of my work in that sector. And, like so many other people, we're trying to do good in the world, and, through environmental and energy activism. And that was great until November. I got very active in the presidential election from the moment that Donald Trump came down the escalator and made his first speech. He started talking about Mexican immigrants. Everybody remember this? And this has obviously been in the news this past week. So you wouldn't know this from looking at me. You probably guess half of my family is Jewish. That'd be correct. My last name is a Jewish last name. The other half are Mexican immigrants. My grandparents came from Mexico as children and didn't speak any English when they got here. And they didn't have very much money when they got here. All they had was work ethic, determination, and a belief in this country that they could better themselves by virtue of a meritocracy, of how hard they could work, of the contribution that they could make to the American society. And so that's what my grandparents did. They worked their tail off. They eventually started a jukebox distributorship for the Wurlitzer Jukebox Company. Everybody remember Wurlitzer jukeboxes? So my grandpa, again, came to this country very young, didn't speak English, came from Mexico, eventually became a distributor for Wurlitzer jukeboxes. That was enough for him and for my grandma to send all 5 of their daughters to college. You had 2 public school teachers, 2 of my aunts. You had one that ran a large nonprofit, ran the Boys and Girls Club out in Palm Springs. You had one that became an attorney, because you always have to have an attorney in every family, right? And my mom became the first female toy designer at Mattel Toys. Everybody can hear me okay, right? Yes. So it's pretty cool. So my mom became the first female toy designer. If you could believe it, everybody designing, and you probably could, everybody designing all the Barbie dolls were men. And my mom was the first woman there. It explains a lot. So my mom was there her entire career, and she did really well. But my grandpa and grandma's family thought that my grandpa and grandma were crazy for sending one of their daughters to undergrad and grad school at Art Center because of what they perceived as the limitations in that industry. And my mom proved so many people wrong. And she proved to me and taught me over the years that you have to believe in what you do, you have to be passionate, and you have to do what you know you're capable of, and you cannot have regrets in this world. On my dad's side of the family, as I mentioned, Jewish immigrants. My grandpa served in World War II in the Army Air Corps. And when he came back from the war, he saw, when he was there, the devastation of nuclear weapons. So he always was very much against nuclear weapons, nuclear proliferation. But he also came back and tried to start a small business with my grandma, carpet, drapery, and upholstery business called Levin Interiors. And they faced anti-Semitism in the 1950s with the last name Levin. And they actually had to change the name of the business to Dean Interiors after the actor James Dean. And one would think that we've evolved beyond this. But as recently as a couple of weeks ago, one of our folks, in fact Robbie is here, wearing our shirt with Levin out in front of Darrell Ice's office, was accosted by one of the people on the other side. And, you know, I don't want to call him any names, but he had some very nasty things to say about my last name. So I feel like Donald Trump has empowered this sort of behavior. He's encouraging this sort of division and intolerance, and I think he's undermining the values that really are the basis for our greatness in the first place. And at the same time, I think our member of Congress is only encouraging and enabling that type of division and that type of unfortunate resentment for our differences. We need to appreciate each other despite any differences we may have, whether it be our nationality, our race, our religion, our gender identity. These are the differences that make us strong. These are the differences that make us uniquely American. And I ultimately believe that we will prevail in this fight, because I think that there are far more people who feel like we do, that what made America great in the first place was our diversity. But then there are people who believe in the false pretense that Trump and so many others are trying to feed out there, which is that we're somehow not one common American family. So for me, when I saw Donald Trump become the Republican nominee, I was all in. I was all in to try to prevent him from becoming the President of the United States, and I thought Hillary Clinton would have made a much better president, not even close, than Donald Trump. So I was there on election night. I was waiting for a great victory. In fact, up in the rafters, there was confetti that was shaped like broken glass, because we were about to break the last and most important glass ceiling. And then we waited and we waited and we waited, and we saw those states come in, and we knew what had happened. And it was the following morning, as I was sitting in the terminal in JFK after I hadn't slept and after I had to deal with a whole lot of Trump people overnight and into the morning, because brilliantly they put Hillary had their people at the hotel next to where the Trump victory party was. I'll never figure out why they did that. So I was at JFK the next morning, and I said, I'm going to take a look at this race, because I also saw what happened here. And some of you know this who know me, but we were very close to doing it last time. And I say we because it's a team decision. My wife and I collectively make the decision. We had our son in 2012. We had our daughter in 2014. And when I was approached in 2014 about running potentially in 2016, we decided not to do it. And there was a piece of me that regretted not doing it. And as I said, no regrets. So I was on the plane ride home after Hillary lost and after I saw what happened back here at home, and I started talking to people. I started asking people, what would you think about my candidacy this time, this year? I knew I could build an incredible campaign team. I knew I could raise the money. I've been involved in campaigns and politics and helping other people my entire adult life. And hey, had people said, not your turn, not your time, let somebody else do it, we invested in somebody else, I would have stood down, I would have said, okay, that's fine. They didn't say that. They said, it's time for a new candidate. It's time for a different kind of campaign. Because last time there was an 84% turnout in our district. Hillary Clinton won our district by 7.5%. This year, as so many of you know, without the presidential election on the ballot, the turnout will go down. By how much, we don't know. It might be 50%, it might be 55, 60, I hope it's higher than that. In 2014, the turnout in this district was 47%. Moreover, the percentage of Republicans versus Democrats, it was far more Republican in the off year. Historically, the off year, in the non-presidential year, it favors Republicans. They're more likely to turn out than Democrats. Now, this year will be different, because when I go out to Darrell Ice's office every Tuesday and I see hundreds of people out there every single week, and we keep going back every single week, and when I see groups like this, and I see Indivisible, and I see so many others that are dedicated. When I go to Democratic Club meetings that used to have 20 people and now they have 100, and if they had 50, they have 200. I see this week after week, literally every day as we're out there campaigning. I know this year is different, but it's also not going to be presidential year different. It's going to be somewhere in between, which means if we're to win next year, we need a fundamentally different kind of campaign than we had last time. And the clue for me, as somebody who's been involved in campaigns basically my whole adult life, there's a couple clues. One of them I see every Tuesday. When I'm out there with you every Tuesday, I see two overwhelming emotions. One of them is anger, frustration, fear, whatever you want to call it. It's a powerful, motivating force to get us out there, to get us going. But it ultimately will not win us the election. If it's only about fear and anger and resentment and frustration, we'll lose. We tried that playbook last time. It didn't work. We were all about Trump being unfit, temperamentally and otherwise. We were all about ISA being unfit for a whole host of reasons. Not enough to get us over the finish line. It's the other emotion that I see. And I go back to what Barack Obama did in 2008. I go back to campaigns past, from John F. Kennedy even to Bill Clinton in 1992. And it's that word that we all remember, that we saw on those posters. It's still as true today as it was then, and the word is hope. It's hope, it's optimism, it's empathy, it's compassion. It's why we're all out there, really at our core. There is frustration and angerness and bitterness about the direction of our country. But is that the only reason that we're out there? I don't think so. We're out there because we care. If somebody doesn't have health care in our community, if there are 307,000 people in our district alone with a pre-existing condition, and we know that that plan that ISA voted for, that he was a tie-breaking vote for, will result in 36,200 people who go without health care, and 3,800 children that go without health care. Again, 3,800 children in our district alone that would go without health care. We know that that impacts our life. We also know if they put forward a tax plan where the billionaires, literally with a B, the billionaires and the multi-millionaires stand to have a huge break at the expense of the middle class, a middle class which is already struggling, that impacts my family. If the quality of the public schools in our district are not the best that they possibly can be, and if we're not investing in our public schools and our great public teachers first, across the board socioeconomically, that makes my kid's life worse. We all understand this. That's why we're out there on Tuesday. And most recently with DACA, that one hit home. Because again, my grandparents, on my mom's side, they would have been dreamers had they come to the country today. They came here as kids, they didn't speak English, and they worked their butt off to make a better life for their family, and ultimately that led to me and my 11 cousins, from those 5 daughters, having a much better life and roadmap in our country. It wouldn't have happened but for them crossing that border over to El Paso, Texas, and then to Superior, Arizona, and then ultimately Los Angeles, California, so many years ago. So I know that we're out there because of our compassion, we're out there because of our optimism, we're out there because of our hopefulness. I also know that we care across the spectrum in our district, whether Republican or Democrat or Independent, we care about our planet. And that's been my great professional endeavor, is to try to do something about climate change and try to reduce our carbon footprint. I've been at it for a long time. When I started the campaign, in fact, before I started the campaign, I sent Darrell Issa a copy of a book called Climate Change for Beginners. It's 150 pages, and it's written at a 4th grade reading level, and it's illustrated. And he still didn't read it. Exactly right. He still didn't read it. And I shamed him. Eventually he admitted that he had read it, and he called the book sophomoric. That's what he told me. And I told him that I'd actually read his book too. He wrote a book, no one knows it. And I called his book sophomoric to his face. So the book I sent him is very simple. If you read it, you understand the consensus that 97% of climate scientists believe that we are contributing to climate change. And if we don't do something to reduce our carbon footprint in a profound way, we're going to have more Hurricane Harveys, we're going to have more Hurricane Irmas, we're going to have more huge wildfires in Los Angeles, the likes of which we haven't seen, and we have to prevent it. Now, what's so frustrating to me is it was only a couple years ago where we were in Copenhagen, President Obama and Secretary Clinton were in Copenhagen, and we were trying to corner the Chinese leadership to get them to sign on to the Paris Climate Agreement. Everybody remember this? And the representatives from China didn't want to meet with President Obama. They were running from the commitment to do something about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we were leading the world in reducing greenhouse gas emissions through power generation, through transportation. And what happened? We eventually got them to sign on. We got every industrialized nation and third world countries and everybody else, with the exception of Syria, really, to sign on to the Paris Climate Accord. So what did Trump do? He pulled us out. The ultimate act of hypocrisy after we got the Chinese to agree to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions is we pulled out of that same agreement. And on what basis? So that the Koch brothers can make a little bit more money. That's what it comes down to. When I see the corrosive influence of the Koch brothers and of the Citizens United decision in our politics, that has absolutely got to be a priority for every single member of Congress to fundamentally change the campaign finance system and to get more and more people voting. That's what we have to do. So I would have mandatory voter registration at age 18. I would make Election Day a national holiday. You look at some of the other countries in the world that have done this, they have 90+% turnout. If we got there, they would never stop us. And I'm encouraged that California is actually one of the few states that wants more people to vote, but I'm discouraged because a lot of the red states, they want fewer people to vote. So long as that's the case, we're going to be in deep trouble in this country. That's how a guy like Trump can win 306 electoral votes despite the fact he loses the popular vote by millions. So what do we need to do now? Well, what I think we need to do, there's a few steps to this. The first thing we have to do is all of the different campaigns and all of the different districts, we all need to work our tails off, and we need to build a progressive grassroots army that can help us carry to victory next November. And that needs to happen in my district, needs to happen in Hunter's district, needs to happen in all the districts in Orange County, up in Northern California. You know, there are 7 districts in California where Hillary carried the district, where you got a Republican incumbent. In all 7 of those districts, the Republicans voted for Trump care. In all 7 of those districts, you got strong Democratic candidates. That's a great place to start, because here in California, we're not as gerrymandered as some of the country. The other thing we need to realize is that we've got a top 2 system. Everybody understands how that works. So the idea that you're going to split the vote doesn't really apply, because you're going to have that Democrat that gets the most votes of all those Democrats, and you're going to have that Republican incumbent in all likelihood in all these districts. So we all need to come together, and that's phase 2. Come June 6th of next year, everybody has to come together, regardless of who they may have been for in the past, and they got to come around a common goal and a common vision to defeat those Republican incumbents. And if we do that, and we're effective, and Trump continues to be Trump, we're going to do great, and we're going to win those 7 seats in California, and that'll put us on the course to win 24 seats across the country, in which case we will take back the House of Representatives. We will put a huge dent in the dangerous agenda of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and the rest, and that will help put our country on the right course once again. Now, what I have said, and let me just be clear about it, I intend to win. We are running a great campaign, okay? I'll just tell you a few numbers and a few endorsements that I want to focus on. In the first 4 months of our campaign, so I announced in March, from March to the end of June, we raised $617,000 from all 50 states, 7,000 contributions, and not $1 in corporate PAC money. The $617,000 was the most of any challenger of any district anywhere in California, and there was one in New York where he raised a little more. I'm very upset about that, but that's okay. We're the second in the country. Roll Call just did an article about it, and he did it in 6 months, and we did it in 4 months. So I'm very proud of that. Moreover, when I take a look at some of the endorsements we've received since we announced, it blows even me away, and we haven't announced them all yet. We're going to continue to announce them. Adam Schiff was the first member of Congress to endorse me. There'll be more endorsing this week. So important because Adam Schiff is a real watchdog. Darrell Issa is a fake watchdog. Think about the contrast here. When Barack Obama was president, Darrell Issa spent $40 million of all of our money on investigations into the Benghazi, Fast and Furious, the IRS, that led to absolutely nothing, to the point where his own party thought he was grandstanding and said, you can no longer be the head of the Oversight Committee. So they put in Jason Chaffetz, not exactly a lot better, but better than Darrell Issa. So, and now it's Trey Gowdy, probably not very good either. But The point being is that he wasted our money, he wasted our time on a bunch of nonsense, to the point where even his own party decided he was grandstanding and showed him the door. Moreover, he's on tape calling Barack Obama the most corrupt president in our history. Think about it. He called Barack Obama the most corrupt president in our history. And he said, back in 2010, and we've got a great tape of this, we're going to keep playing it and playing it, that Barack Obama had committed impeachable offenses. Barack Obama, he said, had committed impeachable offenses. Now that we've got Donald Trump in office, with all the obstruction, the collusion, the emoluments issues, all the conflicts of interest that exist with Donald Trump, his family, his administration, it's like a walking, talking conflict of interest. What does Darrell Issa say? What does he do? Absolutely nothing. He will not stand up to Donald Trump. Not once since Trump has been in office has Issa taken a stand that really opposes Trump. Most recently, one of the things that made me the saddest is something that I had to call Issa out on, which they continue to lie about, by the way, was Charlottesville. So Charlottesville occurred on a Saturday. I remember we were at our first Democratic debate. There were 600 people in Vista. I don't know who was there. I know some of my folks were there. Hopefully some of you were there. It was a really wonderful opportunity to discuss some of the issues. And standing room only. There were 500 chairs. There were 100 people that were in the back. It was amazing. And at that same time, Charlottesville was really going down, and we didn't know about it. So when we left, then I started to see the headlines of what was happening. And we immediately issued a statement. And I waited on Issa, and waited, and waited. And, you know, I was following him on Facebook and on Twitter and refreshing his website and thinking, how long is it going to take him to make a statement? And Saturday came and went, and Sunday came and went. And on Monday, he made a statement, and he backdated it to Saturday. And I said, he backdated this. Not only is this a bad statement, because it didn't go nearly far enough in criticizing the president for his ridiculous comments, but it also was backdated by 2 days. So he did the wrong thing and he lied about it. That's what we have. We have somebody that really doesn't know right from wrong. All they know is survival. And unfortunately, Issa, I've watched now for too many years, more than I'd like to admit. He says more without saying anything at all. If you watch him, he'll talk and he'll talk and he'll talk on a particular issue, but he doesn't really say anything. I'll give you a great example on San Onofre. So San Onofre is near and dear to my heart in terms of coming up with a fix for it. I started following what was going on there in 2007, 2008 when I was given my first tour, when they said it was the best designed and run nuclear power facility in the world. And then 5 years later, it was decommissioned. A couple of months ago, I got my second tour of what's still there. 3,000 fuel assemblies. You were with me. And unfortunately, we have come a long way in trying to figure it out. There was a settlement agreement between the parties recently, but we still have a long way to go. And now could be a great time for the federal government to actually do something about it. And we have no leadership from Washington, D.C. when it comes from Issa at all. Scott Peters is beginning to try, and in fact, I talked to Scott not long ago about trying to work together to do something about San Onofre. And I commit to you that if I have the opportunity, on day one, I'll work with local stakeholders on both sides who I already know, who I already can call up, and work to deal with that problem. Since I've been involved in government and politics for the last decade, I've worked on bipartisan legislation in the clean energy and environmental arena, where we've been able to pass it through at the state and federal level, and we've actually gotten some Republican support. And I think we can do it again, because at the end of the day, I don't think clean air and clean water and a clean beach and not having nuclear waste on the coast, I don't think those are partisan issues. I don't know when it became partisan to care about clean air and clean water. So the other thing I'm super proud of, and the last thing I'll say, because I want to leave plenty of time for your questions, is the local endorsements that we've received. So Tasha Berner Horvath is here from Encinitas. I was so incredibly honored to have your endorsement, Tasha. In the city of San Diego, Barbara Bree and Chris Ward. There are several school board members. There's also folks, the deputy mayor of Del Mar, the mayor of Dana Point, the deputy mayor of San Juan Capistrano. There's a whole host more. But most recently, the National Organization for Women. It was incredible to get that endorsement. So the National Organization for Women only endorsed 2 races in the country this early. It was me, and it was a woman in Florida And they kicked the tires on this campaign. They looked very, very closely at what we were doing. They looked at what the other campaigns were doing. They wanted a message of hope. They wanted a message of being able to bring people together. And they wanted somebody who was going to fight tooth and nail for equity, for women's rights, realizing that women's rights, they help men too. They help families, they help our country. It's not just about women. My wife is an incredible professional, and she's worked really, really hard, just as my mom. My mom, as I mentioned, you went through a lot in her professional career. My wife now is in real estate and finance, and it really is amazing to me that in this day and age, 2017 in California, women make 85 cents on the dollar in California for the same job that men do. For me, it is incomprehensible. It's incomprehensible that groups like Planned Parenthood are still under attack of being defunded, and that groups like now, even 30 plus years after, we still haven't passed the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. It's still 2 states short. Most people think we passed it. We still haven't. So I honestly don't understand how we could have come so far as a country and take all these steps back that we've been taking in the last several months. And I will fight with everything I have, with my heart and my head, to try to force people to do the right thing when it comes to progressive change, progressive activism, whether it's on healthcare, whether it's on the environment, whether it's on education, whether it's on equal rights. Social, economic, and environmental justice are the very core of why we're doing this. We're doing it for our values, the same values that brought my grandparents here, that I want my kids to grow up with. We're doing it for our families, and we're doing it ultimately for our democracy. And if we don't stand up right now, we're going to look back at this period, and we're going to wonder what we did. So as my grandparents and my parents said to me, no regrets. So I thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you so much. Yes. Oh, thank you.
You already answered several questions that the audience had. So the first set of questions is going to be back to the environment. And we have several questions there. As our public lands have become under attack from the new administration, what are some of the environmental issues that you feel most passionately about, and what type of plan do you have to protect our public lands?
So we have to absolutely ban fracking, for one, and we have to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And look, when you take a look at what Donald Trump and what ISA wants to do, I have ISA on tape from not that long ago saying that we should drill off the California coast. I don't know how many of you want to see us drill off the California coast. I don't know anybody except Daryl Issa, and probably people that don't live here, that want to drill off the California coast. And I kind of anecdotally tested this with some neighbors of mine, many of whom are Republican, and not a single one of them wants to drill off our coast. So in general, we need to protect our public lands with everything that we have. There is no planet B. We don't get another shot at this. We've got one planet. We better protect it. We have to protect it with everything we do, and that means 100% renewable energy as fast as we can get there. And in the state of California, we've got SB 100, which says by 2045, all of the investor-owned utilities like SDG&E are going to have to buy 100% renewable energy. And unfortunately, we can't even pass any percent at the federal level. You know, there were efforts to try to get 20% renewable, and we couldn't pass it. There were also efforts to try to do cap and trade at the federal level. It was called Waxman-Markey. We couldn't pass it. So I think we need to lay out the menu of options. First, we got to take back the House. We take back the House, I think we get stuff done. I know we can. I would lay out the menu. I would say, how are we going to reduce carbon emissions? And then I would go with where I thought we had the greatest support, which I think is probably something like a cap and dividend program, which is a tax on carbon combined with redistributing that income, to people that are not polluting, right? Very similar to how cap and trade works in California. All sorts of details to be ironed out. There's a bill, though, that's already out there with Republican support to do what they call cap and dividend. I would also want to see a national renewable portfolio standard, and I've committed to 100% renewable energy in the entire country by 2050, which technically is a no-brainer. It's absolutely easy to do. Now, I'm running in California, not in West Virginia. And in West Virginia, unfortunately, we've got a president now who is selling West Virginians and coal country a false narrative, telling them that he's going to bring back an industry that is no longer the cleanest, cheapest way to do things. It would be as if I were to go to the VHS or 8-track tape factory and say, well, we're going to just have a little bit of a tweak on your 8-track tapes, and then all of a sudden people are going to use them again. Trust me. That's basically what he's doing. And what everybody needs to kind of put in their mind when you hear about this coal argument is at best, we're going to create around 20,000 additional coal jobs. 20,000. California solar industry has 500,000 jobs. Just in San Diego, just this morning I was with Clean Tech San Diego. There are 800 clean tech companies with 12,000 jobs in the clean energy industry just in San Diego. And the entirety of all this clean coal nonsense is 20,000. So you got to put it in its proper context, and you got to realize that we can do so much better. And I think people will agree across the aisle on this one. Because when I look at our district, it's coastal, and people have saved their lifetime for a beautiful home on the coast. They don't want to see sea level rise. They don't want to see a dirty beach. They don't want to see a nuclear accident. You know, we want clean air, we want clean water. I have a neighbor across the street. He's a conservative Republican. His first car that he had was a Hummer, and he just got a Tesla. And he drove the Tesla, and I saw him. I said, Brian, my God, you got a Tesla. This is incredible. He goes, I didn't do it because of your liberal stuff. He did it because it was a cool car, but also because it saves him money, right? So we are getting there. When solar is cheaper than coal, and when the coal museum puts solar panels on the roof, that's really the truth. The coal museum in West Virginia puts solar panels on their roof. Why? Because it's better. It's more reliable. It's cheaper. Those of you with solar on your roof, it works, right? It's really, really great. And we don't need big natural gas plants. We need battery storage, and we need other forms of storage to complement our intermittent renewables. This is totally doable. But we've got to rise up against the fossil fuel industry and make people understand that it's not necessary anymore. And it's going to be painful for a while, right? We have to make sure that people in those industries are trained and retrained for the industries of the future, not the industries of the past, right? And we know a lot about those industries here. You know, we can talk about that too. Right.
Another question on the environment. Do you have plans or thoughts about the song's dilemma?
The San Onofre dilemma. So, as I mentioned, we just toured it, and there are a number of options out there right now. I think the best thing that they could do, well, the primary thing that we got to do is get it out of there safely and quickly, right? And so the question is, what's the best way to do it? When they created San Onofre and nuclear plants like it, decades ago, the idea was that within a reasonable period of time, you would have a permanent waste repository. And they had originally designed it to be in Yucca Mountain in Nevada. And the waste, after going through the reactor, was only supposed to be on site for no more than 5 years, after which it was supposed to leave. The spent fuel was not supposed to be in the cooling pools more than about 5 years. The problem is they never finished building the permanent repository. We spent $40 billion of our money building something that never was finished. And I love President Obama. One of the things that they did, Harry Reid was a majority leader back in 2010, and Harry Reid said, we're not putting this waste in Nevada. So as a result, we've got this half-finished Yucca Mountain. Now, one of the only hopeful signs in an awful, awful, awful budget by Trump was a little bit of money for Yucca Mountain. That gave me a little bit of hope that we might be able to reopen or revisit that discussion. We'd have a lot of retrofitting and changes to do. What they're doing now, though, by Edison's own admission, is experimental. And they're taking that waste after it's been in the spent fuel pool, and they're putting it in cylindrical canisters that they're then welding shut and putting in concrete. They call it dry cask storage. And they're doing it at the site. I think some will remember that the two domes that we see are actually reactor 2 and reactor 3. There was an original reactor which was commissioned in '68 and ran until '92. The site of that reactor originally that got taken away, that's where they're putting the waste right now. And I think a big reason why is they don't want to remediate that site, right? And for them to be able to put and we saw it, and them to be able to put the dry cask there prevents them from having to remediate the site. Now, we can't keep it there because the ocean is right there. It's 100 feet from the ocean. And when you talk to the people at Scripps, or when you talk to geologists, there are faults. There are all kinds of things that can happen. And we haven't even begun to think about acts of terrorism. The other big surprise for me is that, being across the street from Camp Pendleton, I thought, well, maybe there is military security there, right? It's nuclear waste, for crying out loud. There's not. There are 140 heavily armed private security guards hired by Edison. That's what you got there. They're not going to protect against the plane. I mean, they're definitely not people you want to mess with, but they're not going to protect against a plane. So I'm deeply concerned about this issue. I would be completely dedicated to trying to do something about it on day one. I've already talked to Scott Peters about it. He has a bill that's currently making its way through the process to do something called consolidated interim storage, which could potentially send the waste to New Mexico, where the governor of New Mexico, Martinez, has said that she wants it for the economic development it will create. Texas is another opportunity. Utah is another opportunity. And Arizona has a nuclear power plant called Palo Verde. If you drive on the 10 freeway, you'll see a sign that says Palo Verde Nuclear Plant. It's 3 reactors, and it's 1/6 owned by Southern California Edison, which means that technically they could take it if you got a Nuclear Regulatory Commission waiver. But we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to get something done quickly and safely for the residents of this district.
Thank you, Mike. The next questions are about Medicare. Something that affects all Americans is our health and our health care. So Medicare is a highly successful and efficient and popular program. Do you support some sort of Medicare for all, and would you insist that employers increase employees' wages in concert with them saving with such insurance change?
So absolutely support Medicare for all. I think a single-payer system is the best and most efficient way to manage our health care. Full stop, simple as that. And I think that we are looking at employer-provided health care, and that was great 50 years ago. But I think times have really, really changed. When I take a look at what SB 562 laid out there, I thought I supported it, and I thought that it was grossly unfair how it was characterized. We only heard about the costs of it, and we didn't hear anything about the benefits of it. And when you actually study or you look at the independent analysis out there, the savings from a single-payer system is fairly overwhelming for 95% of the population. So what I also think, though, as I look at the Congress today, is what are we going to do right now today? So I hope when I get there, I hope we've retaken the House, and I hope we have the votes. I was really encouraged that Kamala Harris now supports single payer. And if we have the votes, sign me, I will be excited. But if we don't have the votes, we have to fight like crazy so that Trump does not allow the Affordable Care Act to implode, which I think is totally unconscionable. So a lot of the uncertainty being created in the market right now is being created by the president. And I would say that that's a violation of Article 2 of the Constitution, which says that he has to take care to enforce the laws as passed by Congress. The Affordable Care Act, as imperfect as it may be, is the law of the land. And when the president says he's going to take away all the money for people to market those plans, to try to get more people to sign up, to diversify those risk pools, and when he creates uncertainty in the market and encourages insurers to pull out of the market by virtue of that uncertainty, I think Trump is causing the problem as much as anybody else. So we need early buy-in, no question, into Medicare at age 50 or age 55. We should have done a public option in the first place, and we need to do it now. And we need to diversify that risk pool, and we need to have cost controls on prescription drugs, which is something they do in every country in the world, industrialized country anyway, except for our country. We've got to do all of those things. So, but I absolutely would support a single-payer plan, no question.
The next few questions, thank you. The next few questions are about our economy and some fixes that you might bring to Congress. So the U.S. is in about $20 in debt. Don't you wish? $20 trillion in debt. What is your position or thoughts on dealing with the pending catastrophe?
Well, the pending catastrophe that I see is if we no longer have a middle class in our country. When I go around and travel the district, I see two districts I see the coastal wealthy part of the district, and I see everybody else. And I see the divide between those two growing every day. And so I would say, look, no question that the national debt is a huge problem. We can't keep borrowing and raising the debt limit, Absolutely, that must stop at some point. And, you know, when Bill Clinton was president the last 4 years, the last 4 balanced budgets that we had, everybody needs to remember that, and I think we can get back there again. However, right now, we have a deepening divide between the haves and have-nots in our country, and we have to invest in that middle class again. We have to ensure that people can make it if they're working a full-time job. And again, when I travel the district, I see people working longer hours than they ever have before, multiple jobs, and they're not able to make it the way that they were, say, 10 or 20 years ago, or the way that their parents were. And when I see certain people, they're not necessarily unemployed, but they're underemployed. So rather than working as a taxi cab driver at a decent blue-collar job, they're driving an Uber or a Lyft, and they're only working 25 or 30 hours a week, and they have no health care benefits, they have no retirement put away. It is astonishing to me that over half the people in our district couldn't afford a $400 emergency if it happened tomorrow. $400. Half the people in our district would be totally out of luck. And so what do they do instead? Well, you got high interest credit card debt that's out there. And what does Trump want to do? He wants to make it easier for predatory lending. And what do we see? We see more risky mortgages now than we've seen before. So I think that the eroding middle class is the biggest problem that we face in our country from an economic perspective. I think we need a more equitable tax system. I think we need to implement the Buffett rule. If you're a millionaire, you ought to be having at least a 30% marginal rate. If you're a millionaire, you ought to have at least the same rate as a secretary. No question in my mind. And I also think that we have to do everything we can to remember, it just was Labor Day, the importance of the labor movement in creating many of the things that we take for granted today, like the 40-hour work week, like paid family leave, like having health care at all, like having child care that's available. A lot of those things are by virtue of the strength of the labor movement over many, many decades in our history. And I worry that that is dwindling as a percentage of people in our working class. I also look at our district and I see all these great industries that are growing, like clean energy, like biotech, like life sciences, like information technology. All are growing at a rapid rate in our district, but I worry that the growth is only being seen by those at the top. 22% of the jobs in our district, very, very high percentage, are STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But a very small number of those jobs are blue-collar jobs. We need more partnerships between, folks like General Atomics. I was just with an executive from General Atomics, and they have a new partnership with the community colleges. And just the other day, I was over at the Carpenters Training Center, where people were learning how to be carpenters. They start at $16 an hour, but they get up to $41 an hour by the time they're done with a 4-year apprenticeship program. So there are so many good things happening in our district, but I see an overwhelming tide being championed by ISA, by Trump, by people with that ideology that will drive such a huge wedge into our country that we won't recognize our country anymore. And look, there are going to be some people that disagree with me, and they're going to be real happy, behind their white picket fence with their big house and their fancy cars, and they're just going to want to be left alone. My bet, and I hope all of your bet, is there are more people who care about others, that care about common shared prosperity, not just having the very most that they can particularly have, but actually making sure that as a society we're sharing that prosperity. So I thank you for the question.
Thank you. So the next questions are going to be dealing with some specific issues here in the 49th. The first one is I-5 through North County was completed in 1968. In the last 50 years, it has never been expanded, although our population has increased exponentially. Do you support improvements to I-5 at least as good as south to Orange County?
I don't support expanding any freeways. I don't think it's necessary. When you look at the projections of how many cars will be on the road, and you take a look at all the alternatives, look, things like ride sharing didn't exist just a few short years ago, and there's no question that we face traffic bottlenecks, and I want to put working class folks, particularly in the trades, I want to put them to work, but I want to put them to work in sustainable ways. So I'd rather build mass transit systems. I'd rather improve look, we don't have hardly any mass transit in North County. And we have none in South Orange County. None. We have the Amtrak, Metro, and that's it. So I think our time, our effort, our energy would be far better spent rather than expanding freeways, which they're doing right by my house right now. As opposed to that, we ought to be focused on other things that we can be doing, trying to alleviate the stress on our freeways. In South Orange County, the huge issue is whether to expand the toll road. If you go north, you'll see the 241, the 261, the 133, and there are people that want to move that toll road, the 241 toll road, through Mission Viejo, all the way down through San Clemente into Trestles, and ultimately connected to the 5. And that would do great harm to all those communities, San Clemente and other communities. It would also do harm to Trestles and to a lot of the places that we hold dear. And Darrell Issa is perfectly okay with them building that road through Trestles, and I'm not. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'm proud of that. It's not going to win me friends with certain people, but there are a whole host of things that we can do instead that'll mitigate that traffic just as well, if not better. So I don't support, generally speaking, and I'm always willing to look at every opportunity to do the right thing, but generally speaking, I think we need more mass transit. I think we need a lot different options for transportation, and not just more roads and more lanes and bigger lanes and more toll roads. I think we don't need it.
Thank you. You spoke a little bit about the haves and the have-nots, and how you've seen North County and Orange County change over the years. And one key issue here would be affordable housing. What specific plans do you have to promote affordable housing in North County?
Well, I don't know if everybody saw this, but Jared and Ivanka's wedding planner is in charge of the Section 8 program at HUD. And you can't make this stuff up. And I know, right? It's not a joke. It's just a statement. And, Dr. Ben Carson is in charge, obviously, of HUD. And what I have seen is really no effort since that's taken place to address the fundamental shortage of affordable housing in the entire country. Now, in San Diego, we're particularly hard hit because of the formula that HUD uses to be able to deal with homelessness and to provide Section 8. They look at our housing stock, and it's newer housing stock. We rank 4th per capita in homelessness. We have 9,000 homeless in the greater San Diego area. But our housing, we only get 22nd most in terms of HUD funding. So only, basically not even close, and the reason is the age of our housing stock. So once again, our friend Scott Peters has a bill to deal with that equation. Now, it's not the only thing that we need, but it's one of the big things that we need. Now, there are some people in the affordable housing industry that are in it for the right reasons. There are other people in it to make a buck. We have to separate out the two. We have to support good affordable housing projects, and we have to do everything we can to make sure that people that work here, particularly folks that are teachers and nurses and firefighters and small business owners and folks that are working in blue-collar jobs, that they can actually afford to live here. So I was just talking to the Orange County firefighters. Half of them live out in Murrieta, or they live out in Temecula. And that's because they can't afford to live in Orange County. And I know the same is true in Oceanside. I know the same is true in Carlsbad, and it's definitely in Encinitas, and a whole host of other places here in North County where people that are our school teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, they can't afford to live here. So something's fundamentally wrong when you're living paycheck to paycheck and over half your income is going to your rent. And you can't afford to save because the median housing price is $700,000 and you're making 60, 70, 80 grand a year, and you can't even begin to put that 20% down to go buy that house. So then you're, in the worst case scenario, you're stuck with a adjustable rate loan. We saw how all that worked out for so many people in the last downturn. We got to be better.
So this is the heaviest question of the night, and it is, let me review it again. How would you deal with a no first strike nuclear policy, which is something that weighs on everyone's mind?
So Ted Lieu has a bill that basically says Trump can't strike first. And look, I would sign that in like a heartbeat. Because what I see right now, and I studied nuclear proliferation, I know former Ambassador to Russia Mike McFarland has spoken to him specifically about the threat we face in Russia, Syria, North Korea, Iraq, Iran, and around the world. these are unprecedented threats that we face. But what I've seen over the last several months is foreign policy by tweet, and I've seen the president exacerbating a conflict with North Korea unnecessarily. And now North Korea, depending on who you ask, they are not going to allow themselves to be the victim of mutually assured destruction. They're smart enough to realize that if we get into a nuclear war with them, they're going to be, they're going to lose very quickly. But what I'm worried about is the conventional warfare that will continue to exacerbate itself, particularly as it pertains to South Korea, where we've got 23,500 of our troops within the demilitarized zone. We've got 25 million people in the city of Seoul alone, and they're our 6th largest trading partner. And we're going to put that city and that country at risk unnecessarily. Why? Because we are going back and forth like 10-year-olds, and it's all, unfortunately, it's a lot of hyperbole and a lot of talk. But what we need is, leaders that are calm, that are rational, that are thoughtful, that are calculated, not fire and fury and all the rest. That, I worry, will lead to an unprecedented situation, and that's why I would support Congressman Liu's no first strike bill. I think these are very unique circumstances. Hey, if we get a rational, reasonable president, hey, I would go back to where we were. With President Obama, I didn't worry for the safety of our children, our children's children, future generations, that something so unreasonable would happen. I hope and pray that in the absence of a bill like that, that somebody like Mattis or even Kelly will be able to, rip the nuclear football away. So we have to keep praying for that.
Thank you. So the last group of questions is the most amount of questions that we got, and you addressed a lot of those questions in your opening dialogue about the campaign. So I'll just get started with a bunch of these questions. Doug Applegate appealed to the military voters in the district. How do you expect to win these voters away from ISA if you are the candidate?
So I think it's important to tell you how many of them there are. So how many active duty and veteran voters are there in the district? The district ranks 189th out of 435 in terms of the number of veterans, according to the VA zone number. In California, we rank 10th. The 49th district ranks 10th of the congressional districts. There are 9 that have more veterans. Of those 9, 5 are represented by Democrats. None of those 5 Democrats have any military experience. That includes Scott Peters, Susan Davis, Raul Ruiz, Ami Berra, and John Garamendi. So I say that because it's not necessarily a prerequisite. You have to be able to speak to veterans' issues, there's no question. As I mentioned to you, my grandfather served, so did my cousin. My cousin served in the Navy, he's also a member of the LGBT community, so I was particularly impacted by the transgender ban or what Trump wants to do with that, as was my cousin. It's ridiculous. You have to be able to talk, and I think we do as Democrats, be able to talk to veterans' health care, basic well-being and trying to deal with all the issues that occur when they come back, that we honor their service and we treat them with the respect that they deserve, and we make sure that they have that bridge to a better future when they get back after having served. Just as was the case, my grandpa, when he came back, despite everything I mentioned, he was able to start that small business eventually and able to make it into a success. So we have to treat our veterans, we have to honor them with the respect that they deserve. What I'll also say is active duty. There are 42,000 active duty men and women at Camp Pendleton. It's a huge portion of the district geographically. I drive through it every single day. Basically, for all intents and purposes, I'm in North County all day, every day, and I sleep in Orange County. That's kind of how my office is in Vista. But every day I drive through Camp Pendleton twice. The number of voters, though, was only 1,537 in the last election. So 42,000 stationed there, 1,537 voted there, and that was with an 84% turnout. And the reason for that is fairly simple. People are stationed there, but they're not registered to vote there. They vote at home. The other thing, if you're really interested, is 86% of the people that serve at Pendleton are men, but 62% of the people that voted at Pendleton were women. In fact, 64% of all the voters next June will be women. So having the endorsement of something like the National Organization for Women and strong women leaders like Betty Yee, our state controller, Fiona Ma, like Tasha, who just left, like Barbara Bree, those are all, I think, very significant things in our election next year. And so I think people are going to look at the entirety of my public service and everybody else's public service. They're going to make a determination of who they think is running the strongest campaign and who they ultimately want to have represent them and their values and interests in Washington, D.C. for years to come.
Thank you. This is about Orange County, and Darrell Issa is a congressman because of Orange County. Do you take any responsibility for not being able to deliver the Orange County votes for Applegate, and how will you approach this election differently in Orange County?
So, I ran the Democratic Party of Orange County 12 years ago. I didn't run it last year. But what I did do last year is I got a whole lot of people to vote for Hillary Clinton. So if anything, I think we actually turned people out that otherwise wouldn't have voted. And we won Orange County. Hillary won Orange County overall, first time since 1936. Now what everybody needs to realize is that we underperformed last time in San Diego County also. All right? So the discrepancy between Issa and Trump in South Orange County was 11 points. Right? There was an 11-point difference. Big difference. But there was an 8-point difference in San Diego County. We underperformed in both places. We have to do better in both places. So, did Orange County cost the election? I don't think that's the case. I think a whole variety of things cost the election, and I think we've got to stop making excuses and start figuring out how we're going to win this time, rather than blaming or pointing fingers for last time.
Hispanic voters and potential voters, how about Muslims? How do you engage high school kids in your campaign? And where do you find the best energy for us to focus?
Well, the best energy is young people. There's no question. So when you come into our campaign office, and I encourage any of you that are interested, come kick the tires on our campaign. You'll meet some of the people that are involved in our campaign. They're at the back there, wearing our shirts. And a lot of them are coming from the community colleges, from the high schools, and from UCSD. And I'm incredibly honored by that. And they inspire me to work harder every single day than I otherwise would. And I think in terms of all the communities of color, we have to ultimately come together next June. And we have to say, look, you have a fundamental decision about the type of country you want to live in. You can live in a country where we appreciate people, or you can live in a country where we divide people. It's as simple as that. And it's on us to go out and mobilize in every community. Make sure that people understand what we're fighting for and what we're fighting against. But ultimately, what we're fighting for has to be more significant and important. And again, it has to get back to compassion and empathy. And ultimately, I think no one can stop us if people understand that message. Now, specifically in terms of the Latino community, in terms of the Muslim American community, I think both are significant in the district. In terms of the Latino community, there are 9,400 Latino households that we're specifically targeting. We'll have Spanish. We already have a Spanish language website. We're going to have Spanish language ads. As I mentioned, my grandparents obviously were fluent. My mom's fluent too. Sneak preview of what the ad may be. And my son, by the time this campaign rolls around next year, my son just started at Spanish immersion kindergarten, and he's already learning Spanish at a breakneck pace. He's going to have to teach old dad, who's got all that cobwebs, from Spanish in high school and things like that. When I was growing up, my mom decided not to teach me Spanish as much, but because supposedly it would confuse a child to learn Spanish. Of course, all the research now says it's exactly the opposite, that it's extremely beneficial to learn Spanish. We're not making the same mistake with my kids. But the point being is we speak a lot of Spanish in our family, and you're going to hear that. And throughout the course of the campaign, if you don't, that's our fault. So stay tuned. So come visit our campaign at any weekday, any day, see how many people are there. And I challenge you to compare it with any campaign. Certainly compare it to Issa, but compare it to any Democratic campaign anywhere you want, in our district or not. I think what we have been able to build on a daily basis is surprising even to me. Sometimes you just got to roll with it. If you'd have told me that we'd invested in field this early, and that every week we'd have phone banks both in Vista and in South Orange County, and that we'd have precinct walks every week, and that we'd be doing direct voter contact at the rate we're doing it every week this early, I'd have said you're crazy. But we saw something out there. We saw this unprecedented amount of grassroots activism. Again, groups like this didn't exist. You'd go to the, I would always go to some of the clubs when I was executive director years ago. 20 people, 30 people, 30 would be an amazing turnout. Now you go and there are 200 people at the Democratic Women's Club in South Orange County. You go to the Encinitas and North Coast Club and you're going to see 100 people. You come to a meeting like this, this is an incredible turnout. So we saw that and we said, we have the resources to invest in field right now. And if we invest, no one's going to catch up. And I think that's happened already. Just count the number of people that are knocking on doors, that are making phone calls, that are contacting voters today. Decide for yourself. Come see what we're doing and decide for yourself. So I have said this since the very beginning of our campaign. I've said it, 100 times, and I'm going to say it probably 1,000 more. I intend to win because I think we're running the strongest campaign. But if for whatever reason I don't, the very next day, whatever we've built, whatever lists we have, whatever resources we have, the volunteers, the activists that care about our campaign, the very next day I'd say, go kick Darrell Iss's rear end. And I would ask for you to demand that every candidate have that same mentality, not just in the 49th, but in every race. Because if we don't have that mentality, we will surely lose.